Well, US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff has arrived in Moscow for talks with Russian leaders. A convoy of cars carrying Witkoff left the airport a short while ago. Witkoff's visit comes just days after President Donald Trump warned President Vladimir Putin the US would impose tougher sanctions on Russia if there is no progress toward peace in Ukraine by Friday. Well, we have two correspondents covering this story for us. In just a moment, we're going to speak to Charles Stratford, who is in Kyiv. But first, we're going to go to Osama bin Javaid in Moscow. Osama, Witkoff has arrived. What's the plan from here? Is a meeting with Putin directly on the cards?
Well, we expect that he is going to be meeting President Putin because his convoy, as you saw there in those pictures, left from the airport towards the Kremlin. And it is almost like clockwork. It is his fifth visit to Moscow since February. He's been coming here, not just talking about Ukraine, but talking about other issues as well. And this time around, as he comes to Russia, he comes on the heels of a deadline that has been imposed by the US president. He talked about a 50-day period and then reduced it to 10 days. And that expires in just 2 days. So far, what we've seen from Russia is strategic silence. We've heard from the Kremlin spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, that this is going to be a fruitful visit. It is going to be constructive. But again, we've also heard from Dmitry Medvedev, who'd spoken about how any deadline would be seen as these countries coming towards war with each other, and it is not going to be productive. Again, so far, what we've heard from President Putin is that he's willing to go to the dialogue table, but those negotiations, according to Russia, will have to be in a phased manner where the working groups will have to work together, and then perhaps later on there could be a meeting between the presidents of Russia and Ukraine.
Yeah, Osama, you mentioned this. It's only a couple of days to go until Donald Trump's deadline for Russia to end the war, or there's going to be more tariffs and sanctions put on the country. I mean, is that creating any sort of pressure there?
Well, not really, because what we've seen is a completely rebuffing of these sanctions that we've seen so far in the last 3.5 years. Russia has seen some of the most stringent sanctions in its history that have been imposed, not just by the United States, but European Union and some of its other trading partners as well. But again, Russia insists that it has found new avenues to trade. It is looking to the global south. It is a bolstered trade with Central Asian states and in Africa. So it is, according to Russian media and Russian officials, this is a loss for the West. But again, these are hurting the economy. We've seen property prices, everyday prices rise for everyday Russians, loss of jobs, etc. But so far, Russia has been able to withstand all of these sanctions that have been imposed. Its economy has stagnated but not faltered. And it is adamant that it is going to continue not just fending off those sanctions, but also continue its offensive on the Ukrainian front. It has taken more territory towards Kyiv. And in the last few days, we've seen an intense activity of drone strikes, both from Ukraine and Russia.
OK, thank you so much, Osama bin Javaid, for us there in Moscow. We're going to go speak to Charles Stratford, who's standing by for us in Kyiv. And no doubt everyone there in Ukraine keeping a very close eye on these talks coming up with Witkoff. What's been the reaction so far there in Kyiv?
Well, it has to be said, there is far from any sense of optimism that these talks are going to produce much, certainly amongst the people you speak to here in Ukraine. Ukraine's president last night, Vladimir Zelenskyy, said that he had a phone call with Donald Trump on the eve of Witkoff's arrival in Russia. Zelenskyy said that it was a productive call, though. He said that, yet again, Ukraine supports the US initiative for some sort of ceasefire. He said that they spoke potentially about a ceasefire in the skies to try and prevent these ongoing, increasing attacks by Russia attacking or hitting at least civilian infrastructure and seemingly targeting Ukraine's energy infrastructure. And he also said that Ukraine was ready to discuss and possibly even sign this really interesting deal between the US and Ukraine, which would involve Ukraine selling battle-tested drones to the US in order for it to buy US technology, US drones. As I say, that's a draft agreement. but Ukraine very keen to sign that deal indeed. But as I say, there is no real great sense of optimism that these talks are really going to come to much at all. Keith Kellogg, the other US Special Envoy, is due here in Kyiv, we're told, by the end of the working week. That could obviously be today or tomorrow. But let's keep in mind that Vladimir Putin has said recently that his goals with respect to Ukraine remain the same, and they involve the withdrawal of Ukrainian forces from the 4 oblasts, the 4 regions in the east, Donetsk, Lugansk, Kherson and Zaporizhia. It also involves the international recognition of those regions, in addition to Crimea as now being part of Russia. And it wants guarantees, firm, set in stone, signed guarantees that Ukraine will never become a member of NATO. These kind of demands are inconceivable or very difficult indeed for Ukrainians to get their heads round. The notion of territorial concessions by Ukraine seems almost inconceivable, certainly on a political level, publicly at least at this stage. And Russia, only a couple of weeks ago, certainly the Kremlin said that at this stage Russia's goals and Ukrainians' goals were diametrically opposed. So a lot to discuss, but not much optimism here in Ukraine.
Yeah, perfectly summed up. Thank you so much, Charles. Charles Stratford for us there in Kyiv.
Don't miss out. Get the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news and expert insights. Like, share, stay ahead.